What's going on, everybody? It's me, the TheT-SaneOtaku here, and we're back for some more deck techs. Just one FYI, this is the third take of this deck. I've actually recorded two versions of this deck, so if I forget to say something about it, it's probably because I thought I said it from a previous video, just so I'd let you know. So, as you can tell, this is a Simon finisher deck. It was inspired to me to build this deck because of the fact that we got one of these SP from. It wasn't from our boxes. We traded this one for our SP Yoko, and the main reason for that was just because this was our favorite. Me and Nick. This was our favorite card from the set for the most part. It just was so, iconic, and we wanted it SP. And so, thankfully, he was able to give me the baton, and so this is my version of the deck with it in it. So, let's get right into it. So, for level zeros, this is a level 0 rush deck. What that means is, I don't run any level 1s in this deck at all. A lot of the level 1s from Gurren Lagann I found to be very weak, and so I've been trying this Smork-like deck, and it's been performing very well, and I don't know, maybe you guys will see in some playtesting if you see any further videos about how this deck kind of operates. So we run 4 of the To Save the Women I Love Simon. This is not only is it my favorite brainstormer from the entire set, just because it's a tap 1, add 1 card from waiting room to hand, but it's also, once you add it to hand, it's you don't discard. But the other reason is his continuous ability. You don't use it for any card aside from the second, or I should almost say primary. This card's like so good. But we run Combined Gurren Lagann in this deck, and we actually run the Fusion, so he will have markers underneath him. It does only mean that he gets 500 power instead of getting 1,000, but we run him mostly for the brainstorm part, and his entire purpose is to make sure that your hand is full of cards and like that you can play. This is a rush deck, so when you're pumping out units and playing units and all that kind of stuff, you need to make sure that you can keep on getting units back, and he just does that very well. The second thing is this is the entire deck's purpose is to have a full, fruity, meaty hand, where all you have is a thick hand, so that you can play a full board if you need to, because by the end of your level 0, your opponent is going to be at level 1. And they're going to be starting to reverse all of your level 0s. And so you have to make sure you can just keep on putting units down. Otherwise, they're going to punch you from 0 to 2. And that's not what we want. We want to stick on that sweet level 1 for a little bit, and then nicely meander on to level 2 when we're ready. Run 2 of Simon the Digger. His entire purpose of the deck is that he's a brainstormer. Because this is a level 0 rush deck, most of our cards, which are level 0s, don't have any triggers. So I run the 6 brainstormer just so that once we run out of level 2s and level 3s that have triggers and we're running low on climaxes, that I can just place one of him. I already have one of him on the board, and I start milling my deck like crazy. The draw off his ability isn't that useful due to our secondary climax in the deck. And aside from that, you don't really need the draw too much, but having a draw is better than having a brainstormer that adds a card to hand and you discard. So he's got some value there. We also run no Kaminas in this entire deck, so his ability is kind of pointless. If you want to change him out for a different card, I might recommend the next card here. Maybe run this card as a 3 or 4 of. We run 2 copies of Nia. We used to have 3. I took her down to 2, and then we kind of sold the third one, and now I can only run her as a 2 of. I found that 2 was perfectly fine due to one of our other level 0s, but her entire purpose of the deck well, 1, keep your hand pretty beefy. By playing a dude, you get another dude in hand. The actual purpose of her is to, like, meander yourself to higher levels when you're ready. I find myself sitting at level 1, 5 damage, and being able to go to level 2 when I want to because I'm ready for it, and she just pushes me over the edge. And then once I hit level 2, I'm really I start to plus a lot, and then that's where the deck tries to rumble you into the ground. So Cheese mostly here as a 2 of. The reason why it's okay as a 2 of is because we run a searcher, so finding her is pretty easy. We run 4 copies of the Suicider Logon. Suiciders are good, so we run, of course, him. The other reason we run him in the deck is to help us during our level 1 game. The main reason that he helps us in our level 1 game is his first ability of On Swing. You may choose one of your Team Daigerin characters, and it gets power plus 500 for every other character you have. So that's really good, because if we have like a 2,000 here, this gives one of your other characters 2,000, that's 4,000. And then you have maybe Climax to make it 5,000. That can get over some of the lower level ones. And then you can run, you can pump them with Logons, or you can, do a couple other things. And then if it's our main beater in the deck, then these cards are already 4,000s. And you can go from 4,000, 5, 6, and then 7 with a Climax. And then if you need to, you can pump it up with Logon to make an 8-5. Like every single deck tech, you always know that this is a King Kitan. I don't know why, but we only have 7, and 4 of them are in Nick's deck. So I'm always down 1 when it comes to my decks. So King Kitan at a 3 of, probably could get away with running 4 of the main beater, 4 Nia instead of these, but for now I'm thinking that it feels good, especially when he can search us this out of our waiting room once it dies. And the other thing to keep in mind is the reason why he's our main beater is because this deck uses little to no stock. The only stock you use until level 2 is from the next card we have here and this Brainstormer. You never really activate this. Free, and then Logon, of course, is free. So what you usually end up doing is actually paying 3 stock to encore your units back. So you always usually have between 1, 2, maybe 3 stock. So he usually is always a 4,000. The moment you get to the end of level 1 is where it changes. By the end of level 1, you start stockpiling stock. And the reason for that is so that when you hit level 2, you burst, and you kind of go from there. So he's our main beater of the deck. We run 4 copies of Timilf, right? Long-ass name. Timilf the Raging Wave. Yay. Anyway, his entire purpose of the deck is to keep our hand meaty, and he also serves as a great purpose to filter our deck out of cards, so that when we hit to the climaxes in the deck, there's like less of these. Anyway, he goes in, many of you probably don't know what this card does. It's when he gets reversed in battle, you stock away 1, you put him into the memory, and then you clock yourself for 1. You search your deck for a green character and you add it to your hand. He helps you search out for Nia. And then his second purpose is to search out for our level 2, which is the Viral, which I'll get into in a little bit. And he also goes into memory and clocks yourself. So he turbos you to level 2, which is where the deck needs to be. You spam these at level 1. You keep on adding Nias and stuff to your hand to get ready. And then when your opponent pushes you to that 1-5, you go and you just travel into where you need to be. And then the last level 0 we run is 4 copies of Logon. Now, Logon is mainly in here for support. He's also in here for combined. Overall, as a level 0, you never want to attack with this thing, but it's always a really good thing in the back row to have with the Simon here. Now, could you run this at less? Yes, but you need it for the level 2, and it just works out at 4. So, level 1s, we got none. I've said it a couple times, but you don't need it. You really don't. Level 2s, though, we run 2 of the 2-1 backup. I found these effective against SAO, the deck that I built for SAO, at least, for the time being. I don't know how effective it is against other forms of change, but it's also just a 2-5 backup, so there's not much you can do. Sadly, Gurren Lagann did not get a shuffled deck backup, which is the one that I would prefer with this deck. But, you know, anti-change, pretty good. Then we run 3 copies of part of our plus engine, kind of. He turbos us really hard. So, this Lv0 is you pay 1 stock, you play him on the board, and then when you play the Climax Destiny Combining Gurren Lagann, you choose a Gurren Lagann from your hand, and you place it on the board, and then this goes to your waiting area. The reason why he's good is because there's times when you'll have grade 3s in your hand, and they're stuck, and you just can't pump. You either put them into your clock, or you discard them for other Gurren Laganns that you played from the Lagann. But if this means that 3 out of the 4 locations that a Gurren can be, that you could play out of 3. Because if it's in your hand, you play it with this. If it's in your deck or waiting area, you play it with this. So by the time we hit level 2, we should get minimum of 1 Gurren Lagann on the board. Our first level 2 turn. Usually I can get 2 out, maybe 3, but he helps us out a lot. He also is just an 8,000 body, which is not impressive if you don't have the Climax combo, but an 8,000 body is better than some of the other cards I was running in the previous builds. He helps us mitigate all their nasty level 1s, if that are left around, when we hit level 2. So, overall, this card's actually been performing pretty well, and I'm pretty happy I made this deck with green. As we all know, the last level 2 in the deck, 3 copies of Gurren. This card is terrible on its own. Unlike the Lv0, it's a 1-5 body, but you will never play this card unless you have a Lagann ready to fuse. You always place this card, you activate his on placement to put 2 back, and then you automatically just fuse right away. So, this is super powerful when we're trying to go and get off our level 3s pretty early, and it helps us try to control how the game's going. Because if we're behind, we can usually pop out Gurren Laganns and just pump them out with these. And then if we're already ahead, we can usually go with these. Anyway, you look at it, good card. You need it for the combined. Not much more to be said. On level 3s, we run a thick amount of level 3s, and most of them are here to help out Gurren Lagann. We run 4 copies of Gurren Lagann itself. So, we're cheesing this thing out at level 2. You need 4 targets of it in the deck, so that you constantly keep on having the reassurance that it's going to be in a location that you can use. The only time this card is bad is when it's in your stock. If it's in your stock, you got to get that thing out of your stock as fast as possible. That's all we could say. Aside from that, it's pretty powerful when you're sitting there at level 2 and you have a 2 soul and it's constantly dealing 1. The other great thing is that we have 2 forms of burn damage during our opponent's turn. So if your opponent has level 2s that he runs into these guys because he's trying to push you to, game, you can easily swap it back the other way. And it makes it even easier with 2 cross counter. I found this card to be... It doesn't perform as well as I would have hoped. These cards are performing really well, so I assume that we just have to run 2 of this. I've only used the card out of the... I think since I added green to the deck, I've only played maybe a dozen and a half or 2 dozen games maybe. And it's performing pretty well with the 2 cross counter. I've used it maybe, a couple times, maybe half a dozen. And it just burns 4. It's nothing too special that it's just something that your opponents usually are not aware of. So it usually helps out pretty well. So after that, we run 1 Giga Drill Break. This card is basically the same thing as Cross Counter. It's just not able to be activated during your opponent's turn. And it's our way to prevent us from bricking, because if our opponent is playing anti-spirals and he bounces all of our stuff back to the deck, and so we're really behind once we hit level 3, we can play King Kitan and Giga Drill Break for 4, and it usually can get us back to where we were before in terms of just raw power. Aside from that, I've used this card like twice because Cross Counter is just so much better. But we have to run it in the deck because there's another card we run which helps us keep on going through the game. And that card is... what is this card's name? I know it's the 3-0. That's what I was waiting for. We run this card to basically keep us alive. There's 2 reasons we run it for. The one is to keep us alive. The second is that when we get pushed to level 3, and let's say that we lost a couple of our Gurren Lagans, this is to set us up for the Simons. Mostly, you will activate this when you're close to death, and you're just trying to live out as long as you can. You take out 2 of your opponent's columns with it, and it stocks you for 2. I've used this maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times. It's not as powerful as I would have hoped, but it's something that I feel the deck needs, because the moment we hit level 3, because we do clock ourselves quite a bit, there's times when we will hit level 3 when our opponent's at 1-6 or 2-1. So we have to have a way to keep us alive longer than our opponent wants us to. And usually we can keep us alive by reducing damage by 3. Also the stock 2 is pretty good. And it also searches us a Giga Drill Break. So it's overall a decent card. And then, of course, the last card in the deck we run is 2 copies of the Simon Finisher. Really, this is supposed to be a Simon deck, but in all respects, I believe that this deck is more of a Gurren Lagann deck. I've not been able to get this card to work in many situations just because it's a win more. Unlike Last Shot Sinon, this card has to reverse the opponent, and it also has a couple other conditions that are just a little bit more tricky, and it's I don't know, it's hard to say, but basically this card is a win more. If you're head on board and if you're gonna win with some style, and it gives us an excuse to run the doors. So it's kind of why we run it. The other reason why we run it is there has been one game, I think, where the DO4 mattered. My opponent was at, I think it was level 3, 2, and the 4 damage, they took 4 and it took out like a climax, and the climax mattered. So when I pinged him for like the rest of the damage, he took it all, and it was pretty good. So it's pretty niche, but it does have finishing power, and also the SP is just too sexy not to run. To finish it off, nothing too special here. We run 3 copies of Door because we want a thick-ass hand. We run 3 copies of Value. We run it to have these in hand for when we need to do our combined Gurren Lagans. We also run it to give us consistent climaxes in hand, and overall, it's a green climax. What do you expect? And then we run 2 copies of what's there? That's the surface. Oh, yep. So we run these 2 climaxes for the fact that this is a Smork deck, and most of the time when you're in the early game, you can dominate the board so much that your opponent will have an empty field. That's your time to play one of these. It will mill through at least a third of your opponent's deck. Having a level 0 hit for 4 damage, just because 1 off of its base, 2 from this, 1 for direct, is super disgusting. Especially when you hit another one of these, or if you hit a trigger in the deck, you deal 5 to 6 damage. You're milling close to a fifth of their deck off of each attack, and it's just so powerful. Now, you don't want to play these when your opponent is near level 3. Usually you don't want to, because then they have a higher chance of canceling, and you can run the fact of your opponent will live due to them, like I deal 6, and on the 6th I get a climax instead of me dealing 5, yada yada yada. But these are super beneficial in the early game, so they also work well with Smork. So that was the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any questions or any kind of recommendations, please leave them in the comments below. If anybody has a this is supposed to be a Simon deck, but it's basically just a Smork with Gurren Lagann deck. If anyone figures out the amazing perfect build with Simon, please let me know. I'm very interested, and so is Nick. Everyone's just waiting to figure it out. And hope you all have a good day. See you guys.